The mansion was too quiet. Richard Hale stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her stare out the window. Again, just like yesterday, and the day before that, and every single day for the past year. Emily used to fill this house with noise. She would run down the hallways, her little feet making happy thumping sounds. She would sing made-up songs about butterflies and cookies. She would laugh so loud that Richard could hear it from his office upstairs. But that was before the accident. Now, 5-year-old Emily sat in her black wheelchair, silent as a shadow. Her legs didn't work anymore. They hadn't moved since that terrible day when the car crashed. Richard had tried everything. He took her to the best doctors in the country. He flew her to special hospitals in other countries. He spent millions of dollars on treatments and therapies and medicines. Nothing worked. Emily's legs stayed still. But worse than that, Emily's smile disappeared too. Richard was 42 years old, and he had enough money to buy almost anything in the world. But he couldn't buy the one thing he wanted most, his daughter's happiness back. Every morning, he would wake up hoping, maybe today would be different. Maybe today Emily would smile. Maybe today she would say more than 3 words to him. But it never happened. The servants in the mansion whispered when they thought Richard couldn't hear. They said Emily was giving up. They said she was fading away, like a flower without sunshine. Richard wanted to yell at them to stop talking. But deep down, he knew they were right. He was losing his little girl, and he didn't know how to save her. Today was Wednesday. Another gray, quiet day. Richard had a big business meeting, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept going back to Emily, sitting alone in the garden, staring at nothing. He checked his watch. 2 o'clock. He should go see her. Maybe today she would want to talk. Richard walked through the long hallways of his mansion. His footsteps echoed in the emptiness. The house had 15 bedrooms, but only 2 people lived here. Sometimes it felt more like a museum than a home. He opened the back door that led to the garden, and then he heard something that made him freeze. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Emily's laughter. Richard's heart jumped in his chest. He hadn't heard that sound in over a year. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it. But no, there it was again. A giggle, light and bright, like tiny bells ringing. His daughter was laughing. Richard's hands started shaking. He didn't understand what was happening. He rushed down the stone steps toward the garden, his expensive shoes clicking fast against the ground. He could hear music now. No, not music exactly. Someone was humming, and there were strange sounds. Feet shuffling, hands clapping. Richard turned the corner around the big rose bushes, and he stopped breathing. There was a boy in his garden. A strange, dirty boy with messy hair and torn clothes. The boy's shirt was 3 sizes too big, hanging off his thin shoulders like a blanket. His pants were covered in dust and had holes in the knees. He wasn't wearing any shoes, and he was dancing. But this wasn't normal dancing. The boy was doing the silliest, most ridiculous dance Richard had ever seen. He was hopping on one foot, then spinning around, waving his arms like a bird trying to fly. He made funny faces, crossing his eyes, puffing out his cheeks, sticking out his tongue. And Emily was watching him with the biggest smile Richard had seen in a year. She was laughing so hard that tears ran down her cheeks. Her hands were clapping. She was moving in her wheelchair, rocking back and forth with joy. Richard's first thought was, I need to stop this. Who is this boy? How'd he get in here? Is Emily safe? He opened his mouth to shout. But then the boy did something amazing. The boy stopped dancing and looked at Emily. He smiled at her, not a fake smile, but a real one that lit up his whole face. Then he said, Your turn. Move your arms like this. He waved his arms up and down slowly. And Emily, his Emily, who hadn't wanted to move at all for months, lifted her arms and copied him. Richard's throat went tight. His eyes burned with tears. He didn't want to cry. The boy cheered. Yes, you're amazing. Now wiggle your fingers. Emily wiggled her fingers, still smiling. Perfect. You're the best dancer I've ever seen, the boy said. Richard stood there, hidden behind the roses, unable to move. He should stop this. This strange boy shouldn't be here. But Emily was happy. Actually happy. The boy started dancing again, even sillier this time. He pretended to trip over his own feet. He spun in circles until he got dizzy and fell down on the grass. Emily laughed and laughed. Richard felt something crack open inside his chest. Something he thought was broken forever. Hope. It was tiny and scared, like a baby bird. But it was there. The boy stood up and bowed to Emily like she was a queen. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. Emily nodded, her smile bright as the sun. The boy gave her one more funny face, then turned and ran toward the back fence. He climbed over it quickly, like he had done it 100 times before, and disappeared. Emily sat in her wheelchair, still smiling, looking at the spot where the boy had been. Richard stepped out from behind the roses. His heart was beating fast. His mind was full of questions. Who was that boy? Where did he come from? Why was he here? But the biggest question of all was, would he come back tomorrow? Because if that boy could make Emily laugh like that, Richard needed to see him again. Even if he had to wait in the garden all day. Even if it meant breaking every rule he ever made about strangers and safety. His daughter had laughed today, and Richard would do anything at all, to hear that sound again. Richard didn't sleep that night. He sat in his big office, staring at the security camera screens. He had cameras all around his mansion. They showed every corner of the garden, every gate, every fence. He watched the recording from that afternoon over and over again. The strange boy climbing over the back fence. The boy dancing. Emily laughing. Richard tried to see the boy's face clearly, but the camera was too far away. All he could see was a thin kid with messy brown hair and ragged clothes. Where did this boy come from? Why did he sneak into the garden? What did he want? But every time Richard thought about calling the police, he remembered Emily's smile, and he couldn't do it. The next afternoon, Richard didn't go to his office. He didn't answer his phone. He stood in the garden, hidden behind a big oak tree, waiting. Emily was in her usual spot, facing the back fence. But today was different. Today she wasn't staring at nothing. She was waiting too. Her eyes were bright. Her hands kept fidgeting with her wheelchair. She was hoping the boy would come back. 2 o'clock came, then 2:30, then 3. Richard felt his heart sinking. Maybe the boy wouldn't return. Maybe yesterday was just a one-time thing. But then at 3:15, Richard heard a soft thump. The boy landed in the garden, his bare feet hitting the grass without a sound. He was wearing the same torn clothes from yesterday, but today he had a small bag with him. The boy looked around carefully, like a mouse checking for cats. Then he saw Emily, and his whole face changed. He smiled so big it looked like his face might split in half. "You're here," the boy said, running over to her. Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "I waited for you. I brought something." The boy opened his bag and pulled out half a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. "It's peanut butter. Do you like peanut butter?" Emily nodded again. The boy broke the sandwich in half and gave the bigger piece to Emily. They sat there eating together, and Richard realized something. The boy was hungry, really hungry. He ate a small piece so fast, like he hadn't eaten in days. Richard's chest felt tight. This wasn't some rich kid playing a prank. This was a poor child, sharing his food with Emily. After they finished eating, the boy stood up, ready to dance, and just like yesterday, the boy started doing silly movements. But today was different. Today, the boy kept encouraging Emily to join him more. "Can you lean forward a little bit?" the boy asked. "Just a tiny bit?" Emily tried, her face scrunched up with effort. She leaned forward in her wheelchair just an inch. "Yes!" the boy shouted, jumping up and down. "You did it! You're so strong." Emily's smile got bigger. "Now try to reach your hands toward me," the boy said, holding out his hands. Emily lifted her arms and stretched them forward. Her fingers almost touched the boy's hands. Richard watched, his heart pounding. Emily was trying. She was actually trying to move. His daughter, who had given up on everything, was trying because of this strange boy. After an hour of dancing and laughing, the boy started to leave. "Wait." Richard said, stepping out from behind the tree. The boy spun around, his eyes going wide with fear. He looked at the fence, ready to run. "Please don't go," Richard said, holding up his hands. "I'm not angry. I just want to talk." The boy stood frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. "Daddy, no." Emily cried out, "Please don't send him away. Please." Richard's heart cracked at the fear in Emily's voice. "I'm not sending him away, sweetheart. I promise. I just want to know his name." The boy looked at Emily, then back at Richard. Slowly, he relaxed a tiny bit. "Jay," he said quietly. "My name is Jay." "How old are you, Jay?" 9. "I think. Maybe almost 10. Jay shrugged. "I don't really know my birthday." Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Where do you live?" Jay shifted his feet. "Around." "Around where?" "Just around. Sometimes the bus station. Sometimes the laundry place on 5th Street. They have warm air that comes out the back." Richard stared at this thin, barefoot boy. "You mean you don't have a home?" Jay lifted his chin, trying to look tough. "I'm fine. I take care of myself." "Jay stays," Emily said loudly. Her voice was stronger than Richard had heard it in months. "He's my friend. He makes me happy. Don't you dare send him away." Richard looked at his daughter. There were tears in her eyes, but there was also something else. Fire. Emily was fighting for something she cared about. His little girl was fighting again. "Why did you come here?" Richard asked Jay gently. "To my garden?" Jay looked down at his dirty feet. "I heard her crying one day. Last week. I was walking by outside, and I heard this really sad crying coming from behind the fence. I climbed up to see if someone needed help, and I saw her." He pointed at Emily. She looked so sad. Sadder than anyone I'd ever seen. "And I thought maybe I could make her feel better. My mom used to say I was good at making people smile." "Used to?" Richard asked softly. Jay's face closed up. "She's gone now. Been gone for 2 years." The garden went quiet. Even the birds stopped singing. Richard felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. This boy had lost his mother. This boy had nothing. And yet, he came here to make a stranger smile. "You can stay," Richard said. Jay's head snapped up. "What?" "You can come back. Every day if you want. I won't stop you." Jay's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away fast. "Really? Really?" Richard said. "On one condition. You have to let me give you some shoes. And maybe a sandwich that's not half eaten." Jay looked at Richard for a long moment. Then he nodded. The next week was magic. Jay came every single day at 3 o'clock. Sometimes he brought little things he found. A pretty rock, a feather, a flower. Once he brought a stray cat that made Emily giggle for 20 minutes straight. And Emily changed. She started moving more, reaching, stretching. One day, she even leaned so far forward trying to catch a leaf that Jay tossed to her that Richard thought she might fall. Her doctor couldn't believe it. "Whatever you're doing," he told Richard, "keep doing it. Emily's muscle tone is improving. Her responses are better. This is remarkable." On the 7th day, something impossible happened. Jay was dancing, and Emily was laughing. Then Jay said, "I bet you can't stand up, not even for 1 second." Richard almost yelled at him to stop. Emily couldn't stand. She hadn't stood in over a year. But Emily looked at Jay with determination in her eyes. "I can try." She put her hands on the arms of her wheelchair. Her face turned red with effort. Her arms shook, and then, inch by inch, she lifted herself up. Her legs wobbled. Her whole body trembled. But for 3 whole seconds, Emily stood. Then she collapsed back into her wheelchair, breathing hard. Jay jumped so high he almost flew. "You did it. You stood up. You're amazing." Emily was crying and laughing at the same time. "I did it. Daddy, I did it." Richard couldn't speak. He just knelt down and hugged his daughter, tears streaming down his face. That night, after Emily went to bed still talking excitedly about standing up, Richard found Jay sitting outside on the garden steps. The boy was getting ready to leave, Probably go sleep at some bus station or laundry room. Richard sat down next to him. Jay, he said, we need to talk about where you're going to live. Jay looked at Richard with worried eyes. Am I in trouble? No, Richard said quickly. Not at all. But Jay, you can't keep sleeping at bus stations. You're 9 years old. You're a child. Jay stood up, his hands balling into fists. I can take care of myself. I've been doing it for 2 years. I don't need anybody's help. His voice was tough, but Richard could hear the fear underneath. This boy had been hurt before. This boy had learned not to trust people. I know you can take care of yourself, Richard said gently. You're one of the strongest kids I've ever met. But Jay, what if you didn't have to? What if you could sleep in a real bed every night? What if you could eat 3 meals a day? What if you could go to school and have friends and... Stop, Jay said, his voice cracking. Just stop. People don't do nice things without wanting something back. What do you want from me? Richard looked at this thin, scared boy standing in front of him, 9 years old and already so broken by the world. You gave my daughter something no doctor could give her, Richard said. You gave her hope. You gave her joy. You made her want to live again. Do you understand what that means to me? Jay's tough expression started to crumble. His lip trembled. For a whole year, I watched my little girl disappear, Richard continued, his own voice shaking now. Every day, she got quieter and sadder. I spent millions of dollars trying to help her. I took her to every expert in the world. Nothing worked. And then you showed up with your silly dances and your big heart, and suddenly my daughter is laughing again. She's trying again. She stood up today, Jay. She stood up because of you. A tear rolled down Jay's cheek. He wiped it away angrily with his dirty sleeve. I'm not asking you to pay me back for anything, Richard said. I'm asking you to let me give you a home. A real home, because you're already part of this family. Emily loves you. And honestly, so do I. Jay's face twisted up. More tears came, and this time he couldn't stop them. You don't even know me. I know enough, Richard said. I know you're kind. I know you're brave. I know you share your food even when you're hungry. I know you climb over fences to make sad little girls smile. That's all I need to know. But I don't have anything to give you, Jay whispered. I don't have money or nice clothes or... You already gave me everything, Richard interrupted. You gave me my daughter back. Jay stood there crying, his thin shoulders shaking. Richard wanted to hug him, but he waited. This boy needed to make his own choice. Finally, Jay looked up with red, swollen eyes. You really mean it? I can stay here? Forever? Forever, Richard promised. You'll have your own room. We'll get you new clothes and shoes that actually fit. You'll go to school. You'll have birthday parties. We'll pick a day, and that'll be your birthday. You'll have everything a kid should have. And most importantly, you'll have family. Jay's voice came out tiny and broken. I haven't had a family in so long. Well, you have one now, Richard said. If you want it. Jay nodded, unable to speak anymore. This time, Richard did pull him into a hug. The boy was all sharp angles and bones, but he hugged back so tight it almost hurt. They stood there in the garden as the sun set, a millionaire and a homeless boy, holding on to each other like they were both drowning. The next morning, everything changed. Richard woke Jay up early in the big guest bedroom, where Jay had slept for the first time in years in a real bed. The boy had been so tired that he fell asleep, still wearing his old torn clothes. Come on, Richard said with a smile. We have a lot to do today. First, they went shopping. Richard bought Jay new clothes, shirts that fit, pants without holes, underwear and socks, a warm jacket, and 3 pairs of shoes because Jay couldn't decide which ones he liked best. We'll get all 3, Richard said, and Jay looked at him like he had just performed magic. Then they went to get haircuts. Jay's messy hair was washed and trimmed until he looked like a completely different kid. Wow, Jay said, staring at himself in the mirror. I look normal. You look handsome, Richard corrected. They stopped for lunch at a nice restaurant. Jay had never been to a place with cloth napkins and multiple forks. He watched Richard carefully to see which fork to use, and Richard pretended not to notice. When they got home, Emily was waiting in the garden. She had asked the nurse to take her outside early because she couldn't wait to see Jay. But when Jay walked out in his new clothes with his new haircut, Emily didn't recognize him for a second. "Jay," she asked uncertainly. "It's me," Jay said, spinning around. "Do I look weird?" "You look nice," Emily said, breaking into a huge smile. "You look like a prince." Jay laughed. "Well, you look like a princess. Want to dance?" And just like that, they were back to normal. Jay started his silly dancing, and Emily laughed and moved her arms and tried to lean forward. But today was different. Today felt like a celebration. Richard sat on the garden bench, watching them. For the first time in over a year, he felt complete. His family had been broken, but now it was healing. Not in the way he expected. Not through expensive doctors or medical miracles. Through a 9-year-old homeless boy with a big heart and silly dances. After an hour of playing, Emily got tired. Jay helped Richard wheel her inside for her afternoon rest. As Richard tucked Emily into bed, she grabbed his hand. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart." "Is Jay really staying forever?" "Really and truly forever," Richard promised. Emily's smile could have lit up the whole world. "Good, because he's my brother now." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, he is." That evening, Richard enrolled Jay in the same private school that Emily would attend once she was strong enough. He set up a bank account for Jay's future. He legally started the process to become Jay's guardian. But the most important thing happened in the garden. All three of them sat together as the sun went down. Richard, Emily, and Jay. They ate dinner on a blanket on the grass. They talked and laughed and told stories. Emily told Jay about what her life was like before the accident. Jay told them funny stories about the things he saw while living on the streets. Richard told them both about his plans for their future together. "We're going to have the best birthday party ever for you, Jay," Emily announced. "With cake and balloons and a magician." "I've never had a birthday party," Jay admitted. "Well, get ready," Emily said seriously, "because we're going to make it amazing." As the stars came out, Emily started yawning. Richard picked her up from her wheelchair, something she had finally started letting him do again, and carried her inside. Jay followed them, and for the first time, he walked into the mansion not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged there. At bedtime, Richard stopped by Jay's new room. It used to be empty, but now it had a real bed with soft blankets, a desk, a bookshelf, and toys that Richard had bought that afternoon. Jay sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over the soft blanket, like he couldn't believe it was real. "Thank you," Jay whispered, "for everything." Richard sat down next to him. "No, Jay, thank you. You saved my daughter. You saved both of us, really. We were lost, and you found us." "I was lost, too," Jay said quietly. "But I think maybe we found each other." Richard smiled. "I think you're right." That night, for the first time in 2 years, Jay went to sleep in a real bed in a real home with a real family. And in the room down the hall, Emily fell asleep with a smile on her face. The mansion wasn't quiet anymore. It was filled with laughter and hope and the sound of family healing together. The garden where a homeless boy once sneaked in to make a sad girl smile had become the place where their new life began. And in the months that followed, Emily got stronger. She started standing for longer, then taking steps with help, then walking on her own. The doctors called it a miracle. But Richard, Emily, and Jay knew the truth. Sometimes miracles don't come from medicine or money. Sometimes miracles come from kindness, friendship, and a boy brave enough to climb over a fence to make someone smile. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us kindness can change everything. Like if you believe in the power of compassion and second chances. Remember, you never know how one small act of kindness might change someone's entire life. Be like Jay. Be brave. Be kind. Make someone smile today.